Alright, so welcome to the Postmortem, per se, for our game that we created for the Game Jam for Ludum 48, Submortem. For this Game Jam, we really started out the first couple hours after the theme had been revealed, really trying to hash out an idea as our team. I had Arcane Lemon and Kalash with me. But yeah, so we really just wanted to try to find an idea that fit with the theme, but also that we thought since we had more people on our team, that we could use that kind of horsepower and manpower to really get a lot of things done. And so we wanted to not be too ambitious, but also be quite ambitious with our project, even though we only had 72 hours to finish it. So we thought about doing sort of a PT style horror game as well, and a couple other things like Alice in Wonderland and stuff like that. But one of the guys on our team recommended trying to do something with a submarine, and we just thought it was too cool to pass up. So we decided to tackle on this project, and it turned out to be really awesome. I wanted to just go through and show kind of our level design and our art, as well as a couple other things. So let's go ahead and get into it. So here's our file system over here. Our file system is an absolute mess. We didn't try to agree upon one file system type in terms of organization of this. So yeah, everything got really muddled, and yeah, that was partially my fault, and some of the other team members' fault for not trying to discuss that and make it a unified sort of experience there. But yeah, here's our main menu. Kalash did all of the UI stuff, and he did a really excellent job, especially on the in-game manual. So in terms of the actual level scene here in Godot, here it is. It's in its entirety from the outside. So basically, I was responsible for modeling the general layout of the level, and so I created a bunch of wall objects. You can kind of see the pieces repeating here, and the corners, an inside corner versus an outside corner, and I was able to arrange these in such a way that they all fit together, and that I made this sort of basic door block out, and then I made the actual more specific door type doorway there, with we actually used shape keys to open the door, which was kind of fun. We used Blender for all of our art, so yeah, that was really cool to do. So if I actually, if I open up our doors, yeah, you can actually see the blend shapes. You can see the blend shapes in action right there, which is pretty fun to do. It can get all wonky if you're not careful. So yeah, basically our methodology for the level design was we need to make a bunch of damages that the player has to repair as a baseline. And of course, that on its own is not necessarily super fun if you do it over and over and over again. It's like fun the first couple times, but we noticed that it wasn't staying fun for the entirety of it, so then we had to add some mild puzzle solving elements. So we decided that it made the most sense to put it in the engine room here, with some mild puzzle solving where you just had to basically fix all the damages, prime the engine, and then start it. And then the other puzzle, which got a lot of people tripped up, which was probably our fault, was the torpedo bay over here. So the torpedo bay by default is activated with it's basically shocked electricity. We could have done some extra work on the water texture here to demonstrate that, but we just didn't have enough time, and we thought that it was self-explanatory, but apparently it wasn't. That's one thing that you'll run into as a game developers, that not everything is self-explanatory. So you need to try to see if you can make things as crystal clear as possible. Oh yeah, here's the torpedo. It just kind of sits here, and then once that button is pressed in that room, and the electricity's on and everything, it'll just launch out. You can see there's like a bounding box area that's going to hit the bounding box area of this squid guy that's way out here. And this logic was really fun to do. for the torpedo situation. But yeah, it was kind of intensive in terms of like, I don't know. I'm scared of making more and more scripts to run inside the Godot game engine for some reason. I want everything to be kind of continuous, but everything had its own unique logic, so it was kind of hard to do that way. We decided to make a global method name. One thing about GDScript and Godot is that you can make you can basically call any method from any other object as long as you have a reference to the object. You don't even need to know what kind of object it is. And so for scripting and stuff, our global sort of name to interact with something was activate. And so whenever we wanted a generic like activation of anything else, like we just call that function on whatever given object, and it would do the appropriate work for us. Yeah, so if we go into player.gd, which is our main player script, here it is in all its glory. So it's 212 roughly lines of code. Yeah, here's kind of the weapon logic or the item logic here. It's really fun to do. We had a game manager that would like just basically handle the state of the game, check what items we had, as well as if we finished the level or not. It would check all the win conditions and everything. So that was kind of a fun thing to do. We did that with a singleton in Godot and GDScript, which is really useful. Yeah, here's some of the animation playing. We didn't have like we decided to just like reference everything through the through this handy dandy $ sort of function that GDScript has, where it kind of looks at the hierarchy of an object. So yeah, so if input.isAction, just press interact, then you had a debug interact print statement, and then we have a look ray, and that's basically a ray that shoots out from the camera directly in front, or about like 2 meters or so, and we check if that's colliding, and we actually have a set layer that is used exclusively for colliding with interactable items, which is I think the second layer of physics, you know, for for Godot, and so yeah, we just kind of made that a global sort of definition. Yeah, we're going to have all of our interactable objects on this layer, and so then we would you know, call the activate, and then there's also another one where yeah, here we go. So if we are colliding with something that's interactable, we'll just print, you know, press F to interact with, and then we got the collider. And then we had a kind of another thing that we would assign, which is an interactable name, which is this kind of similar to the activate function, but instead this is an actual variable name. And then we would just get, you know, assign that, and then it would show up in the UI. You know, press F to interact with the key or the fire extinguisher or whatever it happens to be. So that was really fun to do. And then also we have these little areas that were really nifty for the hints. It's like a little area collision part. So basically, if the player walks into that, it's going to pop up a message saying that, you know, the sub is damaged, you need to fix it and stuff. So we designed our hint system to be as intuitive as possible. And basically, these areas, they delete themselves after you walked into them once. So if I look at the scripts, yeah, it says, yeah, on area body entered, if body.name is equal to player. So if the player walked into here, then we print our hint text that we export. And, you know, we have the actual hint text up here. We have a hint time, which basically is how long it's displayed to the player, because some hints are going to take longer to read than others. And then we have another singleton in Godot that's called the tooltip singleton. And so a tooltip is really useful as a singleton because it's one instance that handles its state. So we have a generic print, which is kind of like it's kind of like the lower level print. So, but this is going to be overridden by the bigger level print, which would be like our hints and other things. So if you notice, like if you get like one of those big hints, you can't actually see, like, you know, say if you immediately look at fire or water or one of the images, it won't show the message to use like the fire extinguisher or whatever for a couple more seconds, essentially. So this gives us like a priority system, a basic priority system. It's really badly coded, but it still works. So sometimes you just have to do what works when you're on time crunch. But no, we tried to work as smart as possible. And so we made as many things like its own class and its own repeatable sort of reusable thing. And then of course, like towards the end of development, we decided to have more uniquely interactable elements. And so we had like, I think this was like 8 hours or so out, or maybe 9 hours out from the deadline. We added like this ladder here. It's a really basic, 3D model with like an area collider that you can interact with, and then it would end the level, it would check the game manager for success and stuff like that. And then the same thing kind of with this fuse box design. That was kind of a late addition. We were just going to have a button on this wall, but we decided that the fuse box looked cool. So, yeah, this thing was kind of difficult to model in a low poly style at the front of the sub, so that was kind of an interesting thing. Our glass shader was kind of fun. So basically, for the glass shader, I just used a simple visual shader because I didn't want to actually code anything that didn't need it. I had the base texture, which is this kind of low resolution thing, and its alpha is assigned as well. But then we have an emission texture, which is kind of this thing again. Or actually, no, I think I did a different texture for that, and then kind of just gave it an emission, and so that's how we made our glass shader. I didn't want to do like real-time reflections or anything. I just wanted to keep it simple, and that worked out just fine. I could have used like a ramp to edit the amount of shininess, but it worked basically out of box as soon as I applied it, so I kept it the way it was. And then, yeah, I'll let Arcane Lemon talk about any of the models that he did and any sort of other functions.
Hey, Arcane Lemon here. This is my section of the devlog, so I guess I'll just start by listing my responsibilities. So firstly, I was responsible for creating and texturing all the in-game props. What this came down to was about 50 unique models that were replicated throughout the game. Each was either textured directly in Godot or in Blender with low-res pictures. The materials then had a filter and bitmaps removed in Godot, which really gave them the PS1 look, the retro look that we were going for. I took these props and duplicated them and placed them in ways that I felt make the sub feel lived in. And they were rigged with various scripts. That took a lot of time to actually go through and texture all of them and put them in, but I think the end result looks really good. Besides the props, I was also responsible for lighting. After populating the lights in the world, like the props, I wrote several custom scripts to increment light with depth, blinking and flickering lights, to really flesh out the atmosphere that was already established with the props. I was also responsible for compiling all the audio for the game and implementing that audio, everything except the music, that is, which was done by the wonderfully talented Toadile. His music really turned out good, and I think the audio supplements that very well. On the scripting side of things, I mainly focused on back-end logic and utility scripts. This included the game manager, an audio manager, a lighting utility script, and several smaller scripts that supported individual objects, individual game objects. The game manager, as the name implies, was used to manage the game. As we got close towards the end, this ended up being less of just my responsibility and more of the team's responsibility, just because we had so many parts that had to go into it. But I originally outlined the core back-end logic, which included things like adding items to the inventory, victory conditions, losing conditions, the depth incrementer, things like that. The audio manager was also like I said, my responsibility, which it's pretty self-explanatory. It's basically just used to play various sounds in the game that's directly towards the camera instead of in world space. So things like the sound of picking up objects or opening doors actually was played directly to the camera. The main menu, or the themes, the music themes that Totale made for us were played directly through that. Also, there's a creaking of the ships. Other than that, I wrote a lighting utility script. This was really only called a few times, referenced a few times in the game manager, and it was used to change the color of the skybox and ambient lighting in the environment as the player falls in depth, so it actually gets darker, and the outside water reflects that it's getting darker instead of just the lighting. But that's those mainly the scripts I worked on. Like I said, I worked on several smaller scripts, but those were smaller scripts, 50 lines ish or less. But so I'll spare you from talking your ears off about the details of those. We obviously weren't able to add everything we wanted to within the time constraints. Like, I doubt anybody was, but I'm really proud of what we did, and I would have loved to have just one more day working on it, because unfortunately we had a lot of ideas that weren't able to make it in. Most of them were quality of life improvements. We've had several criticisms about abruptly ending the game without knowing what the reason you died was, or stuff like that. So we were actually going to have a victory screen and a cause of death screen. We had also talked about implementing enemies and possibly randomizing events, just to further flesh out the gameplay of it. But like I said, we didn't quite get around to that. But as for my experience in the jam, this was actually my first ever game jam, and also my first ever time using the Godot engine. And as far as the game jam goes, this was one of the most rewarding experiences I've been able to take part of in recent memory. The community was awesome and kind, and the reception of the game was overwhelmingly positive, and it really makes me excited to try and create things in the future. So I do want to give a huge thank you to everyone involved in the community for that. Also, transitioning from Unity to Godot, this is a bit unrelated, but there are a lot of similarities between the two, but there are just as many differences. But I did discover that the Godot engine, for anybody that is looking to just get into game development, is extremely accessible. It might not have the resources, like tutorial-wise, that game engines like Unreal or Unity have, but I think it makes up for it, and the accessibility it gives you at the developer level to do stuff quickly. It offers a lot of tools that are really helpful in that regard. But yeah, I want to seriously thank everyone who took the time to rate and play our game. You'll never know how motivated this makes me to continue to work, and I really want to thank you. So I'll see you all in LD49, and I hope to experience all the awesome creative worlds you all do.
I composed the music. I basically just recorded some piano tracks and used there's a really good library called I believe it's Spitfire Audio's library of sounds and stuff, and so they have a bunch of free, like, really good horror type violins and strings, and it was just really easy to use. So really recommend giving those a try if you you don't have to be a master at music or anything to do horror music. Like, it's not hard. But yeah, I did the piano instrumentation, myself, but everything else was just basically dropping different chords and stuff like that. But anyway, I think that pretty much concludes this postmortem for Submortem. I hope you could check out our game. It's called Submortem. It's on itch.io for free. I'll put the link in the description. But have a nice day, everybody.